All right, good evening. I'm Pete Rettler. I'm the campus dean here at Moraine Park. Welcome to the lecture series that will finally end tonight. And book every Thursday night from here on out because the weather is going to be perfect. So just some housekeeping. Bathrooms are out through this door. Take a right and another right. There is hot chocolate from Dunn Brothers and Cousin Subs out in the lobby. Please don't leave anything here when it's all said and done. Make sure you get something to eat. This lecture series is brought to you by Fredert, Aurora, the Washington Ozaukee Public Health Departments, and Elevate and Moraine Park. And tonight, I'm pleased to introduce Mary Simon. She's the executive director of Elevate, and she'll be your facilitator.
Thanks, Steve. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Let's turn it on. All right. Turn it on. Is it on now? Okay, there we go. Oh, and there's the light that you were talking about, too. So, good evening. My name is Mary Simon. I serve as executive director for Elevate. So happy that you all are here tonight to learn about what the community is doing to address the fentanyl and opiate issues that we've been facing in our community. So we've had a great series, a lot of education, but now it's kind of the time to talk about the action and what can we do as a community and what can you do as an individual to really help us address these issues. So we have a panel presentation tonight. Each panel member is going to have about 10 or 15 minutes to tell you their presentation, and then we can hold the questions until the end unless you have something. It's not a big group, so we'll keep it pretty informal tonight. If you want to ask a question of a panel member, feel free to do that. All we ask is that you raise your hand and let me come to you with a microphone so that we can make sure that we get it on camera. So with that, we're going to start with our first panel member. So I have the pleasure of introducing Julie Driscoll. Julie is the director of the Washington County's Human Services Department, and she's going to talk a little bit about the things that the Human Services Department is doing to address the fentanyl issue. So, Julie?
Oh, good. Thank you so much for having me this evening. Yes.
Can I interrupt one second?
Absolutely.
My one big job that I forgot. Like, you have to take a pre-test. So, if you can get out your phones and take a picture of the QR code, it's going to pull up 3 or 4 questions as a pre-test, and then we'll be doing it again at the end so that we can evaluate how well we did at teaching you a few things tonight. So just take a few minutes, please, and do that for us. We would greatly appreciate it.
I think you got them right? I'm not sure. All right, so well, again, thanks again for having me this evening. I'm Julie Driscoll. I'm the Health and Human Services Officer for Washington County. In the Human Services Department, we consist of 3 major divisions. One is our Child Welfare Division, economic support, where folks get economic benefits like Medicaid, food share, child care, those types of things. And then we have our Behavioral Health Division. And for the purpose of this series, I'm really going to be focusing on the work of our Behavioral Health Division in trying to work on and mitigate the issues of opioids and fentanyl in our community that we've been experiencing. There's a number of different initiatives that we have been working on over the last 5 to 8 years, and I'm just going to go over a handful of them in an overview, and then talk about a campaign that we're currently running. So later on, you'll hear Judge Giernoff talk about one of our diversion programs. But in partnership with Elevate, the Human Services Department runs 3 diversion programs. One is an OWI, treatment alternatives diversion program. One is a drug diversion program, and then of course our drug treatment court, which you'll hear about later today. We're also operating a medication-assisted treatment program out of the jail. And so what that means is individuals who have an opioid use disorder and are going to be released from jail have the ability to start Medicaid-assisted treatment. So that can be injections of Vivitrol, and then they can have continued service and connection to our mental health center, where we have psychiatrists on staff who continue that that medication and obviously outpatient treatment if that individual is needed. We've been running that program for about 4 years. I would say it's been very successful. It's a great opportunity for folks who are in jail but are being released to not have that dangerous opportunity to use as soon as they get released and then have that potential of overdose. So we're seeing some really good success with that program as well. In conjunction with that, we've really developed a robust medication-assisted treatment program out of the mental health center, and that is primarily focused on individuals who have Medicaid insurance or who are uninsured. And so we know a lot of times folks don't have insurance, and that medication that's very important to their treatment, keeping them sober, can be very expensive. And so we're offering Vivitrol, which is an injection. We also offer Sublocade and Suboxone, which is another type of medication-assisted treatment that helps people to work on their cravings, helps eliminate some of those cravings while they work through their treatment and recovery. We have a grant with the state of Wisconsin called it's a opioid grant that helps us pay for that medication and also treatment for individuals who do not have insurance. Recently, you may have heard in the news that there has been the opioid settlement. So there has been a number of lawyers and law firms who have sued the manufacturers of medication that has essentially started the opioid crisis in our country. And some of that those lawsuits have been successful, and Washington County was an entity that signed on to that opioid settlement lawsuit. And so we have received an initial payment of about $2.2 million. We anticipate to receive additional funds through that lawsuit, and last night the Washington County Board approved a resolution to continue that lawsuit to sue the pharmacies, so folks like Walgreens and CVS who actually distributed those medications over time. So we're unsure how much we would receive in that opioid settlement dollars, but we have signed on to do that lawsuit as well. What that means, what are we doing with that money right now? So we are going to be issuing a request for a proposal to develop a sober living house with a focus on women and women who are parenting, because currently in Washington County there are no sober living facilities for women. There is a sober living facility for men at Exodus House, but there currently exists nothing for women. So that's the first area that we're going to be focusing those dollars. Secondarily to that, it's still a community conversation. I think groups like this would be very helpful to aid in having that conversation of where do we continue to spend those dollars, what's going to be really impactful, how do we get the longest return and the deepest return on those dollars. Because this is our opportunity, I believe, to really try to mitigate the devastation that has occurred over the last decade or so of what we've seen with the opioid epidemic. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about a campaign that we've been running for about 1.5 years. It's called Change the End. And so I will show you one of the formats that you have seen this over on that table. When we're done here tonight, you can go over and look at some of the other sort of messages that have been created from this Change the End campaign. We've been working with Epic Creative, which is a local marketing firm here in West Bend, and they've been doing targeted social media ads to individuals who are 22 to 55 around issues of substance use, mental health, and other types of needs, homelessness, that type of thing. Really trying to get folks to have that visual message and then click on the link that then directs them to a place where they can identify where the services are available in our community. So I just want to give you a little bit of details of what the performance of that campaign has been. So since we started, it's reached 278,398 people. It's had over 1.8 million impressions, so that means there's people who've kind of seen it. We've had 12,926 ad clicks. So if somebody sees it, and you all know you're scrolling on your news feed on Facebook, and you sort of see something, you're like, what is this? And I'm going to click on it. So 12,926 people have clicked on the ad, and then we've had 6,380 link clicks. And what that means is once they've clicked on the ad, they've gone further in to fill out our survey. It's a short questionnaire that then sort of asks what the need is, and then clearly clicks into connection to the services that are available in Washington County. It also heavily promotes 211, which is a call center that provides resources to individuals in the community for various things that they might need services for. We are going to be continuing this campaign. We've just been talking with the Washington Ozaukee Health Department. They're going to be using some ARPA funds to continue this campaign and expand it into Ozaukee County. So we're very excited about that. So is that about what I'm supposed to be doing here? So I don't know if there's initial questions or we want to hold questions till the end.
No, we can go ahead and ask questions now. Anybody have any questions? Hold on one second, let me come back by you.
Turn the mic on.
That's good.
Yeah, you just talked about when people leave the jail that they get the MAT medication. How about the people coming in who need medication coming in so they'll go to withdrawals while they're in there? What do you do for that?
So the Washington County Jail, they have a contracted medical company that provides all of the health care needs for individuals while they're in the facility. This is really aimed at connecting them to services once they leave.
Got it.
Because as anybody who's worked in the criminal justice system knows, kind of when you get released from jail, you're kind of like, good luck, here you go. So this is really to provide that warm connection for them,
Okay.
so that they can, get connected to resources.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else with other questions? All right, can we give Julie a
Good,
hand?
thank you so much.
So you get me next again. I have the pleasure to talk with you about a community coalition that is just starting up their work here in Washington County. Better? It's not on. Can't hear me? There. Is that better?
Oh, wow, now you can really hear me.
All right. So I have the pleasure of talking to you about the Washington and Ozaukee Substance Use Coalition. Recently, the Washington Ozaukee Public Health Department completed what's called their CHIP process, which is to look at the needs in the community as it relates to public health and what their areas of focus are going to be over the next 5 years. And one of the places that they identified a huge need in Washington and Ozaukee County is in the area of substance use. So as a result of that CHIP process, we formed a coalition. For those of you who might not be familiar with what coalitions are, it's a group of people that come together to address a common issue or a common goal. And it's people from all different sorts of walks of life. So law enforcement, schools, parents who are concerned, people in recovery, social workers, faith community, anyone who is interested in making a difference in the area of substance use can come to our meetings and get involved with the coalition. The coalition meets on a quarterly basis, and we'll have educational programming at each of the larger coalition meetings. But then we have action teams underneath that coalition. The action teams are focused on 3 specific issues. The first one is on treatment and recovery. So one of the needs that was identified is a need for access to treatment. So when people have a substance use disorder, how can we make it easier for them to get into treatment when they're ready to do that? And then how do we support them in their recovery? What can we as a community do to support their efforts and maintain their recovery? So we have an action team that's focused on treatment and recovery. We also have an action team that's focused on education and awareness. So these kinds of events and just getting the word out there that substance use, opiates, heroin, methamphetamine is here in our community, and that there is help available for you if you need it. What can you do? How can you learn more about it? How can we help our youth learn about drugs and alcohol so that they can make healthy choices and healthy decisions? And so that action team is really kind of focused on increasing the educational opportunities as well as increasing the community's awareness that this problem even exists. And the third area, third action team is focused on funding, right? So we know that a lot of this work, money is a part of that process, right? We need money to do some of these things. So the goal of that action team is to understand better what dollars are coming into our community, how are we using those, and then how do we find new money to help us do some of the things that we're doing. Hopefully that action team will be able to help with the opioid settlement dollars to provide some direction to the county on how to best use that money that's going to be coming into the community, but then also working on identifying what else does our community need and where can we find the funding that can help us address those needs. So the coalition is a great opportunity for anybody to get involved. We welcome everyone and anyone and encourage you to reach out and become a part of it because it's a community issue. We're not going to be able to fix it all by ourselves, and so if we all come together collectively, we're going to have a bigger impact. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the coalition and what it's all about and what we're doing. Yep.
Is there a website for joining or how do you become part of it?
So the question was, is there a website? There is not a direct website to it. So the best way to get a hold of us is probably, from my perspective, elevateu.org. And then go to our contact information. My information is on there, and I would say reach out to me, and we'll definitely get you hooked up. Other questions? It's a quiet group. All right. Then I am going to introduce you to our next speaker. So far you've heard from two of us who do this as a part of our work, right? The work that we're doing is part of our work. Lisa is here not as a part of her work, but as a part of her life. Lisa has a family member who suffers from a substance use disorder. We thought it was really important when we're talking about what can you do or what can people do to hear from someone who has lived it herself, right? And how did she take care of herself as a family member, and how did she help her loved one? So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. You can stay. Terry, I'm so sorry. Terry.
It's okay.
You want to stay there? You want to stand up? Okay.
Okay. Over 10 years ago, Can you hear me? A little over 10 years ago, my daughter, she was 17, she had a baby, and she had hooked on pills. I didn't see it, I was too naive. I just kept going with life myself. I had other kids, and I had a little boy with me that I was raising. And time was going by, and I started noticing, and she was asking for money. She just lost her job. And she was at this job from the time she was 13 until she was 21. So she started asking me for money, and she wasn't looking for work. It's probably when I realized that she was using a lot. That's really hard on me. It got to the point where she was lying. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I was borrowing her all the money, and it wasn't for a while yet after that I realized that I was actually enabling her, giving her the money for cigarettes, for gas, for food, when she was just taking that money down to Milwaukee. I stopped doing that, so I would just give her a couple cigarettes, or I would put a couple bucks in her gas, $3. It still got her down there. It got to the point where my husband and I ended up with her 2 daughters, and I just had to shut down and cut her out of my life.
That must have been hard.
Yeah, it was.
How did she respond?
Called me names. She would call, we'd fight. It would always be my fault. And I took that to heart because she was such a good kid growing up. And I would always have to ask, what did I do wrong with her? And it took a long time to realize it wasn't me. It wasn't the choices I made for her, the choices she made for herself. And I realized at that point I couldn't change it for her. She had to change it for herself.
What kind of support did you find to make that hard decision?
Just shutting her out. It was hard. It was mentally draining on myself and my family. I heard she was living on the streets, sleeping in the parks. Middle of winter, I had no idea where she was. I consumed my days with worry. I think at one point, finally, when she was living in the Dells, I accessed her email address and I hacked her account. I was able to see things that no parent should ever have to see, but I knew she was alive. And I would delete things from her accounts, Facebook including. I got into that account. She would call me. I wouldn't answer because she knew, or I knew she knew. Eventually, I would answer and we'd fight about it, and I'd just hang up. By that time, I just started getting strong enough to be like, hey, if you're going to continue living like this, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and as long as I know you're alive. And she settled with okay, she was okay with it. And there would be times like she'd have to call me and tell me, hey, I can't find my phone. And I would have to locate it for her. And there was a few times on probation, I would call her probation and let her know where she was. There was active warrants out. I'd rather see my daughter in jail than sleeping in the middle of winter at a park or in a car on the streets. As a parent, we want the best for our kids. And when you can't financially do that or help or bribe them to do the right things, jail was the best thing, so I thought. It kept her alive another day. I mentally prepared myself for that devastating phone call. I turned my phone off every night because I didn't want to know. But when you pick up your phone in the morning, it's going to vibrate. And there were times that I would miss a lot of calls, whether it was unknown, restricted, or 72 missed calls from my daughter. So the last time when she got busted, I was happy. She was coming here. And when she told me that she had the offer to do drug court, I was happy. I had my reservations about it, not knowing if it was going to help. And lo and behold, 2 years later, she's doing awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your life is like now?
Let's see. My husband and I have our house back. Tasha has her 2 daughters back. It's kind of quiet at the house. Still kind of getting used to that after a year. But I see a happy daughter, responsible, and she's doing all the right things, and I can't thank drug court enough for pushing her to be where she is and the confidence that everybody gave her during that period.
Does anyone have any questions for Terry? I know it was hard for you to do that. I want to say thank you for that. I think it's really important. I'm really proud of you for turning your phone off at night. I really am. I know that's hard. I know that's really hard, but you need to take care of yourself, right? You need to sleep. Yep. Thank you. Any questions? All right. We're going to end the panel then with Judge Giernoth. So Judge Giernoth is our judge for our drug treatment court program. She's going to talk with you a little bit more about what drug treatment court is and how the criminal justice system is responding to this opioid crisis. So Judge Giernoth, actually we should give Terry a hand. I'm so sorry.
Well, good evening, and thank you for the introduction, Mary. As she indicated, I am currently the drug treatment court judge for the Washington County Adult Drug Treatment Court, which has been operational since January of 2020. And Terry's daughter is one of the graduates, proud graduates of that program. I also serve as your Branch 4 Washington County, or a circuit court judge in Branch 4 of your Washington County Circuit Court. There are 4 branches here in the Washington County Circuit Court, and the drug treatment court is operated out of one of those branches, that being the branch I currently operate. And so this drug court formed as a result of a recognition that the tools and resources available to the criminal justice system to address the substance use disorders that were plaguing people in our community and contributing to the criminal behavior affecting our community were not meeting the solutions that we needed. And so the drug treatment court was formed in order to better address those particular needs. I want to take my time to better educate you as to what a drug treatment court is and how our drug treatment court here in Washington County operates. So, a drug treatment court is a partnership between the criminal justice system and the treatment community. Courts use evidence-based practices combined with strict behavioral accountability in order to structure treatment, supervision, and intervention to address substance use and associated criminal activity. The partners for your Washington County Drug Treatment Court include the Washington County Human Services Department, the District Attorney, your local Sheriff's Office, the Public Defender's Office, the Wisconsin Department of Corrections local office here in Washington County, and Elevate is our nonprofit partner. The goals of the Drug Treatment Court are to reduce recidivism. Recidivism is reoffending, criminal behavior in our community. To reduce substance use amongst the participants in the drug court, to rehabilitate participants. And I've shared with you the mission statements of our drug treatment court, emphasizing the personal accountability aspects of the drug treatment court, focus on reducing recidivism, which ultimately will lead to increasing public safety here in Washington County. The structure of the drug treatment court here in Washington County is what's referred to as a post-conviction drug treatment court. What that means is every participant in drug treatment court is doing so by way of a sentence in a criminal case. The person appeared before a judge, was then sentenced to, was convicted of an offense and sentenced to drug treatment court as a part of accountability for whatever criminal behavior that person was convicted of. Referrals to drug treatment court can come from any source. Of course, our local district attorney's office, the potential participant's attorney who represents him or her, our Department of Corrections here in West Bend, Human Services Department, or any other source, like a family member or a support person for that particular individual. In order to be eligible for the drug court, the person must meet certain objective eligibility criteria. And I've listed, not all, but the most notable eligibility criteria, which relate specifically to your residency, meaning residence here in Washington County, your status as to whether you can qualify or have an eligible offense, and you cannot be what is referred to as a violent offender. That would make you ineligible. Additionally, individuals must meet the definition of high risk, high need as it relates to their substance use disorder. So to understand how the drug court operates, it's understanding the relationship between accountability and court obligations combined with supervision. So participants are held accountable for a series of court obligations that come in phases. They are supervised in the community by a probation agent from the Department of Corrections, combined with a case manager who holds them accountable, who monitors their progress as they progress through the phases of drug court. Information is collected, both by the case manager and by the probation agent, about the participants' activities, including treatment, including their residence, their employment, whether they're attending community support groups, whether they're complying with other requirements of the drug court. And ultimately, participants appear for what are called status hearings. That's a court hearing before the drug treatment court judge that happens on a set periodic schedule. We'll talk about that in a second. But at these status hearings, participants are, their participation in drug court is reviewed. We talk about compliance or non-compliance with their drug court obligations. We focus heavily, hopefully, on the participants' successes in what they've accomplished thus far in drug court. And there's always an effort to support participants who may be struggling in any aspect of their recovery or their life when they appear in drug court. If you've ever come to criminal court for any reason, you would have seen what is generally referred to as an adversary approach. The criminal justice system, by its nature, is an adversary system. When someone is charged, it's state of Wisconsin versus Mary Simon. The versus indicates an adversary process. In drug court, however, the drug court judge uses a non-adversary process. And so often when participants start in drug court, it is unsettling because they're used to a criminal justice system that is adversary to them, a judge that has a different role and a different level of engagement with them. And so with this non-adversary approach, oftentimes what the focus, not often, the focus is on empowering participants to take ownership of their recovery, to find self-confidence in their recovery, in order for them to find success in recovery. In order for the court to best operate, the court functions with a drug court team. This is a multidisciplinary team consisting of members of the agencies that I indicated comprise the drug court not the drug court participants, but the agencies that have gathered together to form the drug court. And what we do is engage in a pre-court staffing. This is a conference where the drug court team members meet to discuss the participants' progress, or lack thereof, since they had participated in drug court last, since they had appeared for their staffing. This information is brought to the judge and discussed amongst the team members in order to discuss potential interventions from the drug court and how to address the participants in drug court that particular week. At a staffing, each team member on the team has an opportunity to present his or her perspective and advocate for their assessment of how the participant is performing in drug court. And the goal of this type of a discussion is to ultimately reach a consensus. When I talked to you, or when I mentioned the agencies that have joined to form the drug treatment court, this is a multidisciplinary team. And so You have members of law enforcement, you have members from the legal background, you have clinicians. And so when we talk about the purpose of the staffing, the goal is to reach this consensus from the different disciplines that come to the table to ultimately form a recommendation as to what to discuss with the participants, how to acknowledge their successes, how to support them in the challenges that they are experiencing, how to hold them accountable when they haven't met their obligations for the week. Ultimately, the judge is the one responsible for deciding what action is to be taken, but the goal is really to get to that outcome through a consensus. These staffings are confidential. They are not open to the public, and records and what occurs in them are also confidential. Staffings are held immediately before drug court, which occurs on a weekly basis, Thursdays at 2 o'clock. And the drug court is what I referred to when I talked about participants appearing on a weekly basis for their status hearings. When we talk about accountability in drug court, one of the aspects of it I want to make sure you understand is the model that emphasizes incentives over sanctions. So when I explained the monitoring that goes on with regards to participants, I focused on all of the obligations participants have, along with the accountability participants have for meeting those obligations. And what we try to focus on is acknowledging their successes as much as possible, because ultimately that's what we're trying to encourage, is progress in the program, ultimately leading to graduation. Of course, rewards are designed to increase the desirable behavior, to reward the positive progress, and when necessary, sanctions are used to decrease what we refer to as undesirable behaviors. We focus on timing these responses as closely as possible to the behaviors when they occur. We don't wait 3 or 4 weeks to address what occurred. We try to do it as timely as possible so that participants are aware that we are paying attention, we are attentive to their progress, both positive and negative, and we're attempting to have the most effective responses by doing them timely. A question or a belief that is often represented to me is that drug court operates with what are referred to as high magnitude responses. And that is a misperception for sure. The goal is to focus on interventions responses, whether they be sanctions or whether they be incentives that are of the moderate range. And common incentives that you would see on any day that you would choose to come and observe drug court would include verbal praise from the judge or from the team members, rounds of applause or standing rounds of applause. We have a weekly fishbowl drawing that participants are eligible for. And we also use special awards, drug court recognition awards, to recognize participants that are succeeding in particular aspects of their lives or their recovery. Additionally, when you look at the common sanctions used in drug court, you'll see they fall also in the middle intermediate magnitude range, as opposed to the far high magnitude side, where you'll typically see verbal warnings from the judge, written assignments, which are never particularly popular, increased check-ins with the case manager, being required to come back to court more frequently than what your status would otherwise require, having to meet with your case manager more than what your status would otherwise require. So these are common examples of incentives and sanctions that we use in order to both give recognition but also have accountability in drug court. So the way you move through drug court is by advancing through the phases. And it's a 5-phase program, each phase having a structure that is relatively similar but has different requirements as you obviously progress through your recovery. So some of the common denominators in all of the phases are that the requirements are stagnant, meaning they don't move. When you start drug court, you know what phase 1 requires of you, and on day 1, you know what phase 5 requires of you. So the requirements don't change depending upon the participant, and they don't change as you progress through the program. Of course, each phase focuses on your involvement and ultimately completion of treatment to address your substance use disorder. Abstaining from use is obviously the ultimate goal. Attending your case management meetings and following through with your probationary requirements. Submitting to random drug screens for accountability for abstinence from use. Engaging in community support groups. Obtaining employment or engaging in education. Making progress in other goals that are specific to the participant's circumstances. And then establishing pro-social relationships or improving the relationships that may already exist for that participant. On this slide, what I've done is map out the 5 phases for you and summarized what I'm usually asked are the highlights of these particular phases. So it's a 5-phase program. You'll see the minimum duration of each phase. Phase 1 is 60 days. Phases 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all 90 days. Those are minimum days in the phase. I'm going to repeat that. Minimum days in the phase, meaning you cannot complete phase 1 in less than 60 days. Can you be in phase 1 for more than 60 days? Absolutely. It depends how long it takes you to get through the program requirements for phase 1. Then the next column talks about the frequency of the court status hearings, which is how often does the participant come see the drug court judge. You'll note that phase 1 is weekly. When you get to phase 2, it's every other week, and that stays the same through phase 4 of the program. And it isn't until phase 5 when the participant is reduced down to once monthly for the duration of phase 5, which again is a 3-month minimum phase. You'll see the frequency of minimum drug testing, random drug testing, which is important for the accountability part of the program. Obviously, our goal is abstinence. And you'll see again that emphasizes minimum. It can always be more than that, but that's the minimum program requirement. And then ultimately, each phase has a required number of consecutive sober days before the participant can advance to the next phase. And that often is a reflection of the participant making some of the most significant strides in his or her recovery. Sober days are such a celebration when participants are adding on to those days and days and days. And so those are often some of the most exciting achievements for our participants to share with the team on their days in drug court. So a quick summary of some of the highlights of these particular phases. There are many more components and requirements of each phase, but these are often the ones that I'm asked about the most. Finally, I wanted to share with you some program data and outcomes. We are now starting our 4th year of drug court. It started in 2020, so we have 3 full years under the belt. 31 total program participants, 11 total graduates of the program. I completed this slide yesterday. As of this morning, we now have 13 participants in drug court. So one joined this morning. Our drug court partners with UW-Milwaukee, Washington County for statistical analysis as it relates to recidivism. And the most recent data that we had available in fall of last year indicated that our court is consistent with state standards for recidivism and drug courts, for reducing recidivism in drug courts. If I had room on the slide, I would have put an asterisk that indicates that our data is not yet sufficient to be statistically significant. And what am I meaning by that? Because we only have 31 participants and 11 graduates. We are a young drug court. But at this point, all indications are good in terms of the court being effective in recidivism, reducing recidivism. The average days from admission to graduation, when I talked about minimum length of the program being 14 months, if you have no additional days in every phase, it's going to take you 14 months from start to finish. But average days from our participants are 485 days. So you're seeing about 16 or so months is the average for our participants to complete the program. And about half, almost exactly half now, given this morning, of our participants have needed the residential level of care treatment when they commenced participation in drug treatment court. And I bring this to your attention because it really speaks to the high-risk, high-need population that is entering the drug treatment court, residential being the highest level of care available for substance use disorder, and the fact that this population is really targeting those individuals who are struggling the most significantly with their substance use disorder, this being the level of care they need when they begin their journey in drug court. And then finally, that's the figure we use for our current annual budget, and it's probably not shocking, but the highest budgetary expenses for the drug courts come from the expenses related to drug testing and the expenses related to case management services related to the work of the court. So, where can you get more information about drug courts? Drug courts in general, a great source is the National Drug Court Institute. I've given you the website for NDCI. That's a national organization that is a great source for understanding drug courts and how they operate at the national level. I've given you the website for our Washington County drug court, so you can find how to make referrals to our drug court if that is something that you find yourself in need of doing. Additionally, you'll find the policy and procedures handbook there, as well as other information about our drug court. Ask a graduate. Ask a participant about his or her experience in drug court. Or come. Thursdays, 2 o'clock, in Branch 4 of the Washington County Circuit Court is where you will find many people working incredibly hard on their recovery and making some amazing progress. And you'll have an opportunity to see it for yourself. So it's open, and I welcome you at any point. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right, there are questions for Judge Giernoth.
So if someone is eligible, they can either choose the drug treatment court, or what is the other alternative?
Sure. So eligibility means that you can seek admission as part of being sentenced in a criminal case. So you would still ultimately have to be sentenced by a judge, and that judge would have to sentence you to drug treatment court as part of your sentence. So being eligible doesn't mean you automatically get in, but if you decline, if you decide it's not an option for you, then you pursue a different sentencing argument in front of a judge. A lot of participants who are in drug treatment court are in drug treatment court as an alternative to incarceration. The vast majority of them were likely facing significant incarceration and chose to participate in drug court as an alternative to facing either a recommendation or a likely sentence of incarceration. The program is designed to give opportunities to individuals who are likely to be incarcerated and give them an opportunity in the community to address their substance use disorder in lieu of incarceration.
All right, and I'm guessing you get one chance at drug treatment court, or can you, if you are non-compliant and you get kicked out, can you ever get back in?
You can get back in. It's a great question. So this is addressed in the policy manual for the drug treatment court, so it's available for anyone to see. It isn't just something I make up. But the answer is, if, for example, I'm a participant in drug treatment court and for whatever reason, the recovery for me right now is not a fit and it is not happening, and I'm discharged from drug treatment court. And 3 or 4 years from now, I'm still struggling with my substance use. I pick up another criminal case and I want another chance. I can seek admission on my new criminal case. I cannot attempt for readmission on the case I was discharged out of drug court from. So once out, you cannot come back in on that same case. If at some point in the future you pick up another case and it's a different criminal case, you are eligible potentially on that new criminal case.
And in the example tonight, the speaker talked about the daughter that lived in Wisconsin Dells, but then came through our drug treatment court, and I thought one of the criteria was you have to be a Washington County resident. How does that work?
You were following along. This is fantastic. Great questions. So we have a definition of resident in our policy and procedure manual. And resident can be, I don't have it verbatim off the top of my head, but it can mean historically resided in but does not presently reside, has family that resides in and is able to reside in with a supportive family network, things of that nature. That's, for example, two of the most common examples that fit. And for that particular participant, both of those fit. So this was historical home. This is where her family was. The substance use, I think, is what was causing not to be in the home area. And so she fit the definition of residency.
And then how many counties in the state have a drug treatment court?
The better question is how many do not? The majority of counties in Washington County, so we have 72 counties, but we do not necessarily have 72 drug courts. Some drug courts share court systems. So I can't, off the top of my head, I do not know how many there are, but there are overwhelming majority of counties that have drug courts in one form or another. Our drug court is one model. There are other models as well. So the majority of court systems, I should say, in counties have drug courts in one form or another.
Thanks.
Great questions. Haley?
You mentioned the budget for drug court. I'm just curious if you have an idea of the cost savings by taking this proactive approach versus just having people go back through incarceration.
Mary will know, and perhaps Julie knows, the average cost to incarcerate somebody for a year in the state of Wisconsin in the Department of Corrections. It was $40,000 or so a couple years ago, if I recall correctly. Great question, Haley. So I can't speak to it specifically with regards to our program. Ultimately, there are studies available on the national level that compare the cost of incarceration for individuals with substance use disorder over the cost of treatment in the community and the cost of these drug courts in the community, and they unequivocally show a significant cost savings. As to the dollars specifically in Washington County, we're not there yet with data. We will be eventually.
And what I would add to that is, if there's short-term savings by not incarcerating them because they've satisfactorily completed the program, but there's also that long-term savings because of the recidivism. The rates of recidivism are going down, and so we're seeing more productive citizens, employed, paying taxes, less incarceration.
Hi. Getting back to the eligibility of the program, can you speak a little bit about when you mentioned eligibility as far as nonviolent offender? Can you explain some of that and what it deems violence and nonviolence?
Sure. So there's a specific definition in the statute as to what constitutes a violent offense. A violent offense would generally cause bodily harm to another individual, be done with intent to cause bodily harm, involve a weapon that caused bodily harm. Those are some examples of it. When an eligibility assessment is done and that issue of a violent offender is in play, what we're looking at is whether the person has a prior conviction for an offense that makes them a violent offender under the statute. So we have to look at their prior conviction. It often involves pulling what is called the criminal complaint, which is the charging document that would have listed the allegations that resulted in the conviction, to see whether it involved a weapon, whether it involved harm to another person, things of that nature, to determine whether it actually meets the violent offender definition or not. And then there are some crimes that specifically meet the definition of violent offender. Armed robbery is a garden variety example. Any form of sexual assault would be an example. Those types of offending behaviors are considered violent offenses. Some examples.
Other questions?
Just earlier, they were talking about shared resources, Ozaukee County and Washington County. How come they don't share the drug court resources for that, since they're so closely related anyways, and they already share other resources? I was just, what's the point behind that?
So court systems are slightly different because the jurisdiction for a court is in place by state statute. So criminal cases can be charged in the county in which they allegedly occurred. And there are very few provisions, if any, that allow for an offense that occurred in Washington County to be heard and tried, for example, even if the reference is tried, even though you're not trying a case, but to be tried in Ozaukee County. At present, there are no provisions that allow for that kind of crossover, even for the purpose of drug treatment court. To your point, however, our court does have what is referred to as reciprocity, which is for residents of Washington County, someone who meets our residency requirement, but who is charged in another county with a crime, and they would be eligible for drug treatment court if charged in Washington County, but they happen to be charged elsewhere, Ozaukee, Jefferson, it doesn't really matter. They can seek admission to our drug court as long as they meet our drug court requirements and attempt to be sentenced to our drug treatment court through the other county's criminal justice system. So that's referred to as reciprocity. It's not unique to our court. There are other drug courts across the state that have reciprocity as well. And so that's one concept of attempting to address the concern that you have, which is sort of this artificial county line that divides a problem that really doesn't have a divide. Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? I know we have a couple of drug court participants here. If they would like to share their experience, that would be fine with me. I'm not going to call you out, but would anyone like to speak to their experience? No?
I will, even though I spoke. Excuse me. I just want to say my experience has been great, and like I said the other night, I probably wouldn't be where I am today without it. And the judge, Elevate, Alaris, Nate, everybody in this whole program makes you feel heard, seen, and understood, and that's what we need. So it's awesome, in my opinion.
I appreciate that. I just want to emphasize one aspect of it that I think I think it's remarkable that so many participants and family members are thankful for the opportunity that there is a drug court that exists, and I think it is that. It's an opportunity that we need to remind ourselves exists for individuals to have this chance to find recovery, and it's something that they work for and they fight for every day. This is not easy. It is absolutely not easy. It is incredibly difficult to come into court and be challenged and accomplish the phases and the requirements of the phases. It's incredibly difficult to do it in front of random strangers that you don't know before you get into drug court, to have to figure out how to talk to a judge, to have to figure out how to deal with all of the requirements of drug court, and then to get it all done and be at the finish line and ultimately graduate. So it is something that I think is incredibly taxing on individuals, and sometimes I think that's oversimplified. And we as a team remind ourselves of this often, that every day there's a lot that goes into participants and the successes that they are having. So when they get to the finish line, the credit is theirs. It is absolutely theirs. So with that, 2 o'clock Thursdays, Branch 4, hope to see you there. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to give one more chance to either one of the panel members. Is there anything that you want to add to what we've talked about tonight? Anything you want to share? Other questions for any of the panel members? Yep.
I do have a question about this entire series. Maybe somebody can answer. I was not fortunate to have my son stay around, and so this has been enlightening to me, everything about it. But I'm kind of curious as to all the programs, is there something for people that are grieving the loss of their child through fentanyl, other than, church and things of that nature? Is there anything, any type of program that you are aware of?
So I am aware that there is a
family support group for parents who have lost a child. I will give you my card, and I don't remember the name of the contact person, but it's a group of primarily moms who have lost a child to an overdose, and that is something that's just available in the community. It's facilitated by just a regular person, and there's no cost to it. So see me afterwards, and I can get you my card, and then I can track down that information for you, and we can connect you. Elevate also has a support group for family members who have a loved one struggling with a substance use disorder. Again, there's no cost to that either. Most of the families that are participating in that are parents who have an adult child who is suffering from a substance use disorder currently. It's on Wednesday nights from 5 to 7 at our office in Jackson. It's free. We encourage people to come to that as well to get support. It's a very challenging issue. I'm sorry for your loss. We hope to be there for people when they need us and to be able to connect them with resources. So check out Elevate's website or reach out to any of our staff, and we'd be happy to help. Other questions? Comments? There were a couple of other panel members that couldn't be here tonight that I just want to highlight them. There was a group called Celebrate Recovery. So many of you are probably familiar with AA and NA. Celebrate Recovery is more of a faith-based self-help type of a program for people suffering from a substance use disorder. I believe they meet at Northbrook Church. Is that right? Okay. And so Celebrate Recovery is an option for individuals that are struggling with a substance use disorder and would like to take a faith-based approach. So that's a group that's out there. If you're not familiar with them, Google them, and I'm sure you'll be able to find lots of good information there. The other individual that was supposed to be with us tonight but had a previous commitment is Representative Rick Gundrum. He's our local representative here in Washington County. He has been a strong proponent for addressing substance use disorders at the state level as far as legislation is concerned. He sits on the Substance Abuse Committee for the state of Wisconsin, Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Committee for the state of Wisconsin, and is a great advocate. So if you are not familiar with Rick's work, I would encourage you to reach out to him and let him know, that you're concerned and you want to see that that work continues to be focused at the state level on how to address this issue. It's a multi-layered effort. It takes everybody. And so we really appreciate your being here tonight and hope that you will share what you have learned. I know people have asked. The videos are going to be available for all 4 sessions. First session is out on Elevate's Facebook page and will be out at other places. And then the second session will be out within the next few days on our Facebook page. So check it out, share it, and spread the word about what we've learned over the last, technically 6 weeks, right, because of this, no, but it's supposed to be 4, but any last minute questions? Yep.
I just want to make a comment as being on drug court and part of the team, for people to know the participants go through a lot. I mean, coming in, getting sobriety is one thing, but then learning a different way of life is completely different than they ever had before. And for me, it's a privilege to be part of that with them. To see graduates, it is really impressive. And to have Terry here, I can remember talking to her when her daughter started. So I do, see, I get emotional too. But it is, they become so close in our lives, and it's a privilege that they allow us to do it, but the growth that they do and the things that they do and achieve in their life is amazing. So without that program, I don't know, I mean, I think we've had so many great successes, even people that haven't graduated, they still have successes.
So if you don't know, that's Michelle. Michelle works at Elevate as a case manager for drug treatment court.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and Mary, remember to put the post-test up. And just one more question for Judge Giernoff. Are alcohol-related offenses eligible for drug treatment court?
This microphone is on, so I should be fine, right? So if you're referring to impaired driving charges, like what we commonly refer to as like drunk driving cases, operating while intoxicated, the answer is no. Those types of offenses are not eligible for drug treatment court. However, if your substance abuse disorder involves alcohol as your substance of dependency or in any way is related to that, that does not make you ineligible. So if you are charged with an offense that is otherwise an eligible offense, and one of the substances that you struggle with is alcohol, you are still eligible.
That being said, there are, I think Judge referenced it, and I think Julie referenced it as well, there are 2 other diversion programs that the criminal justice system operates in conjunction with us. So we do have a program for individuals who have been arrested for either a second or a third OWI offense. It's a less intensive program, but that's been around for a lot longer, and we have had really good results as far as reducing recidivism. We have some good data for that. And then we also have, and that's kind of, Judge talked about high risk, high need for drug treatment court. OWI, TAD is really more low risk, low need types of clients. And then we have the drug TAD program, drug treatment alternative and diversion program for individuals, mostly with opiate, or now we've added stimulants, cocaine, methamphetamine to that program as well. And it's kind of a medium risk